See, what's the square root of 9? Well, we all know the square root of 9 is 3. Technically, the square root of 9 is positive and negative 3, but today we're only going to focus on the principal square roots, or the positive square roots. On this bottom one, we have 2 times the square root of 25. Well, we all know square root of 25 is 5, because 5 times 5 is 25. So we're going to do 2 times 5. 2 times 5 is 10. When you have a number that isn't a square number, like 25 or 9, those are both square numbers because 3 times 3 gives you 9. You don't have any remainders or anything left over if you do the square root. It comes out to be a whole number. If you don't have a square number, then there is a way to get this into more simplified form. And that's what we're really focusing on today. So to start that out, what you're going to do is figure out what are some factors of 24. Remember that factors are numbers that go into 24. They multiply together to get a product of 24. So I know that 1 times 24 is 24. 2 times 12 is 24. 3 times 8 is 24. And 4 times 6 is 24. What we are going to be working with today is using the square numbers. So we are looking for factors that are square numbers. 1 is a square number, or a perfect square, that's also what they're called, because 1 times 1 is 1, but 24 isn't. So that's not going to help us out any. 2 and 12, neither one of those are perfect squares. And 3 or 8, neither of those are perfect squares. But we can use 4 times 6, because 4 is a square number, or a perfect square. So we're going to simplify, and instead of doing square root of 24, we're going to break this apart and do the square root of 4 times 6. Because 4 times 6 is the same thing as 24. So all we're doing is breaking this apart a little bit. We're not changing the value any, because still underneath here, 4 times 6 is 24. Now I'm going to break this apart even farther. So I'm going to break it apart into the square root of 4 times the square root of 6. If you can, you simplify. And this is why I wanted to use the one that had the 4 in it, because the square root of 4 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So I'm taking out the square root of 4. And I'm changing this part just to a 2. The only things that go into 6 would be 3 times 2. Well, 3 or 2, neither one are square numbers, so that's not going to simplify anything for us. So we're just going to leave that as times the square root of 6. So this is as simple as I can get the square root of 24. This is as simplified as it's going to get. 2 times the square root of 6. So we're just going to do this several times. Please make sure you're writing down the work to go with the examples as we go. So we want to think about what numbers go into 162. I know 2 must go into it because it's even, so let's try that. 162 divided by 2 would be 81. Well, 81 is a perfect square, so I'm going to go ahead and use this. If you came up with a different number, you can try that one also. I'm going to break this apart into 2 times the square root of 81. Then I'm going to do square root of 2 times square root of 81. I can't break square root of 2 down anymore because 2 is a prime number. Nothing goes into it. Nothing multiplies by itself to give you 2. So I'm going to leave this as square root of 2. And then over here, square root of 81 is 9. So I'll change this to 9. So I have square root of 2 times 9. When we write this in simplest form, we always write the number that's not underneath the square root. We write that first. And then we can go ahead and put the square root of 2 after that. When they're written next to each other like this, it's kind of like a variable where you have 9 times the square root of 2. You don't actually have to write any multiplication signs or anything in between there. You can just leave it as 9 times the square root of 2. On this one over here, we have the square root of 400. So we need to figure out what numbers go into 400. We could do 2 because it's an even number, so 2 times 200. or 4 times 100, or 5 times 80. Those are some off the top of my head. So that's how you're going to come up with what numbers that you're going to put underneath the square root sign to break it down. You have to think about, what do I know that goes into that? So the first thing I always do, obviously, is I check to see if it's even, because that's what I did first on both of these. If it's even, I always tried the 2 times whatever, because that's an easy one that we can usually do in our heads. So I'm going to actually choose 4 times 100 to use, because 4 and 100 are both square numbers, so I should be able to break this one down quite a ways. I'm going to do, instead of square root of 400, we're going to do square root of 4 times 100 underneath there. Then I break that on down, square root of 4 times square root of 100. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 100 is 10. So I get rid of my square root signs. They have totally disappeared. Now I'm going to simplify this because I can. 2 times 10 is 20. So the square root of 400 is just 20. Now maybe you already knew that, so you didn't have to do this method. And good for you. If you already knew square root of 400 was 20, then you could have just written down 20. Usually it doesn't work that way, though. So on this one we have square root of 75 and square root of 200. With the square root of 75, I want to think about what numbers do I know that go into 75? Well, it's not an even number, so 2 doesn't go into it. Then I think, does 3 go into 75? Yeah, 3 times 25 is 75. Does 4? No. Does 5? 5 times, it must because it ends in a 5, so 5 times 15? Yeah, 5 times 15, sorry. That's all I got off the top of my head. So I'm going to go ahead and use the 3 times 25. Why did I choose 3 times 25 instead of the 5 times 15 to use? Yep, 25 is a square number. So underneath here I'm going to do 3 times 25 instead of 75. Break that apart into square root of 3 times square root of 25. Square root of 3, can't do it, so I just leave it as square root of 3. Square root of 25 is 5. 5 times 5 is 25. So this is as simple as I can get it, but I have to rewrite it with a 5 first, and then times the square root of 3. On the right-hand side, I have a 200. Well, last time when I was doing this, 100 worked out well for me. I could do 2 times 100. I could do 4, it's another square number, times 50. I could do 5 times 40. I could do 10 times 20. So I want to look at the one with the biggest square number. So I have several in there that I know I can break down farther. Actually, all of them could be used. You would just, some of them require more work. To get the one that has the least amount of work, you're looking for the biggest square number. So 4 is a square number and 100 is a square number. I'm going to go with 100 because it's a lot bigger than 4. That means I'll have less work to do later. So we're going to break apart 200 into 2 times 100. Even farther, square root of 2 times square root of 100. Square root of 2 I can't do, so I just leave that. Square root of 100 is 10. So I have to write this in my simplified form, 10 times the square root of 2. Okay, there are a set of homework problems for you to do. All of the ones that are numbered, so here we've got 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. You need to go ahead and do those. Please make sure that you're showing work. If you need to ask your neighbor for assistance, that is fine, but make sure you're allowing them to get their work done also. So pause the video, and there's more, another section, or 2 actually, after this. They're a lot shorter, so pause the video, and then when you get done, go ahead and restart and do the next parts. the next section is to do the same thing, but this time we have fractions. So when we're doing square roots of fractions, in order to simplify these radicals, we can just break down the square root, break down the fraction into two different we're going to put the square root on both parts of the fraction. I guess that's what I need to say. So we can do square root of 16 over the square root of 36. Well, square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 36 is 6. 4 times 4 is 16. 6 times 6 is 36. So I have 4 6. But that's not reduced, so I need to go ahead and reduce that even more. 4 6 reduces to 2/3. On the right-hand side, we have square root of 1/4. So we're going to break this apart into the square root of 1 over the square root of 4. Square root of 1 is 1, square root of 4 is 2. I can't reduce the half anymore, so that's it. There are a few of these to do. All you do is square root of 4, square root of 9. Write your fraction in simplest form. Make sure you're showing your work. Work would consist of this steps, showing square root of 1 over square root of 4, and then the answer. Pause and work on these problems, and when you get done, please restart. This one has a little bit more to it. You have to simplify the radical, or simplify the square root, and then multiply by whatever's on the outside. So we have 5 times the square root of 36. So what I need to do is figure out what's the square root of 36. Square root of 36 is 6, so I'm just going to do 5 times 6. And that's 30. So you have to simplify always as much as you can. We have, on the other side, 2 times the square root of 28. So we need to break down 28. It is not a square number, so we have to break this 28 apart. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to do that like we started the lesson earlier. So 2 times 14, I can break apart 22 into. 4 times 7, can break that apart like that. Yeah, I think that's it. 2 times 14 doesn't contain a square number. Neither one of those are square. But 4 times 7, the 4 is a square number. So I'm going to use 4 times 7. So I'm just going to rewrite this. I've got a 2 in the front. And instead of 28, I'm going to do 4 times 7 underneath the square root sign. Then I go ahead and break this part apart like we did earlier. Just leaving my 2 in front for now. It doesn't really do anything yet. Square root of 4, and then I break this apart, square root of 7. I can simplify the square root of 4. Square root of 4 is 2. So I've got this 2 that I already had out there, just bringing it down. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 7, I can't simplify anymore, so I'm just leaving it as the square root of 7. Now I simplify what's outside the radical if I can. So 2 times 2 is 4, and then I'm just going to write square root of 7. So this is a little tricky. You have to make sure that you remember that one that's in the front and always keep bringing it down. On this one, we're going to simplify. First, we've got the square root of 81. So square root of 81 is 9. Square root of this 81 is also 9. In this problem, both of my square root signs disappear. So I don't need to worry about them anymore. So I have 2 times 9 times 9. 9 times 9 is 81. 81 times 2 would be 162. So this most simplified is 162. This one I have 6 times the square root of 8 times the square root of 12. So I'm going to go ahead and leave my 6 out front. Don't need to do anything with it. Now I have to figure out what am I going to do with this 8 and what am I going to do with this 12. I can break 8 apart into 4 times 2. So that will break down even farther into square root of 4 times square root of 2. Then I need to break my 12 apart. I can break that apart into 4 times 3. So I'm going to do the square root of 4 times 3. 4 square root of 4 times the square root of 3. So these two numbers are representing my square root of 8. And over here, this is representing my square root of 12, sorry. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave the 6 the same. I can't do anything with it yet. Then I just go one by one and see if I can break them down. Square root of 4 is 2, so I write that there. That square root of 4 turned into a 2. You'll notice that its square root sign totally disappeared. I can't do square root of 2, so I have to rewrite the whole square root of 2. Next, I have another square root of 4. Square root of 4 is 2. Last, I have a square root of 3. I can't simplify a square root of 3, so I have to bring down that whole square root of 3. I'm going to multiply all of the numbers that are not underneath a square root sign. So that would be my 6 times 2 times 2. 6 times 2 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. Then what I can do is multiply the numbers that are underneath square root sign. So I can do square root of 2 times the square root of 3. The square root sign just stays there, but then I multiply the 2 times the 3. 2 times 3 is 6. So my answer for this one is 24 times the square root of 6. Tricky, tricky. So we're going to go ahead and try that. On square root of 8, we can break that apart into 4 times 2. Square root of 32, I could break that apart into 8 times 4, but then I'm going to have to break apart that 8 again. So I need to think of something bigger than 8 times 4. Oh, how about 16 and 2? 16 times 2 is 32. So 16 times 2. Then I'm going to go ahead and break these apart. Square root of 4 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 16 times the square root of 2. Square root of 4 is 2. Can't do anything with this square root of 2. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 2, can't do it, so I'm leaving this as square root of 2. So I multiply my numbers that are outside of square root signs. 4 times 2 is 8. Then I multiply my numbers that are underneath square root signs. So I've got a 2 and a 2. What's this 2 times 2? You're right, that's 4. So now I've got another square root of 4. I can't leave this as square root of 4 because I know, and you know, that the square root of 4 is 2. So I'm breaking this square root of 4 down into a 2. Then I go ahead and multiply. So 8 times 2 is 16. Since there's no more square root signs, I know that I've got it worked out as much as I can. On the right, we have square root of 2 times the square root of 8. We know that we can't do anything with the square root of 2, so we're going to focus on the square root of 8. Square root of 8 we can break apart into 4 times 2, or square root of 4 times square root of 2. To remember to bring down this square root of 2 also. The only one I can simplify is this one in the middle. So I'm going to bring down my square root of 2. Square root of 4 is 2. But bring down this square root of 2. Now I combine the terms that are not underneath the square root sign and that are underneath the square root sign. I've only got this 1, 2, so I'm just going to write it out there in the front. Then I have my square root of 2 and my square root of 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4, so this is going to change into a square root of 4. And again, just like we did over here, we need to break this 4 down into a 2 because square root of 4 is 2. So this is the same thing as 2 times 2, or just plain old 4. Okay. If you need, like we didn't get the I section and you need to pause, take a second to breathe, go back and rewind and rewatch the last 5 minutes or so, then you might want to go ahead and do it before we start this part. This is when you have parentheses and an exponent on the outside. So what this means, anything to the third power means you're going to multiply that thing, in this case that's 2 times the square root of 5, times itself 3 times. So all this means is 2 times the square root of 5 times 2 times the square root of 5 times 2 times the square root of 5. Okay, we can do this. It's just like what we did a minute ago. When they're next to each other like this, if you want to go ahead and write it out with the dots in between there, that's okay. Then we put our ones that are not underneath square root signs. We go ahead and put those together. So we're going to do, 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. So now I have 3 sets of a square root of 5 that I still need to use. So I multiply the numbers underneath there. 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5 is 125. Then I'm going to go ahead and break that apart. The 125, I know I can break down. Sorry. So 125 can break apart into 25 times 5. So I'm breaking this 125 into 25 times 5. So I still have my 8. I still have this under the square root sign. So 8 times square root of 25 times the square root of 5. Square root of 25 is 5. Bring down all this other stuff. 8 times 5 is 40. Can't do anything else with the square root of 5. So I just leave it there. So there are a few more problems for you to go ahead and work out. So go ahead, stop the video, or if you want to keep it on so you can just rewind as you're going, you can go ahead and do that. Make sure that you have work shown for every slide in the packet before you turn it in, because that's going to be part of your points. So especially on the homework problems, you need to make sure that you have the work shown. If you need any more examples, it is your responsibility to rewind to that part of the video and re-watch it. You could also probably find some videos on the internet if you need another explanation besides the one I'm giving you. Thank you.